we'll do maybe 2 tables at a time and just go over all the models. And let's see, you're the Thursday group. Does the Monday group have a practical this coming Monday? No, theirs is the following. Okay, so you guys definitely 7:30 next week. Okay, well, what do these look like? Seminiferous tubules. So this is in the testes. You might see, I'm just looking at some of these, there's you look on the labels of the slide, some of them say spermatogenesis, some of them are going to say testes and epididymis, although we're not going to test you on the epididymis, but either one of those you're going to see basically the same thing here. So what do we got here? This is all one seminiferous tubule. What's going to be on the very outside? What structure is this? Either ask you a structure or a cell. Okay? That would be on the outside of an ovary. And it's the same kind, well, it's different material, but this is just one basement membrane. It's a pretty consistent theme, just an anchoring. A non-cellular layer. So there's a very thin basement membrane. And then as you go towards the center, cells are maturing. So one of 2 choices for the cells on the outermost rim of each seminiferous tubule. So something like that would be a good guess. These are all various spermatocytes in different stages of maturity. So spermatogonia are going to be the most primitive. They're like stem cells, and then they're going to mitotically divide into what? Some of them are going to be the chosen ones and continue to develop into what? Eventually, but that's not until you're waiting here. So again, on the periphery, you've got either spermatogonia or primary spermatocytes. So some spermatogonia are going to continue on and differentiate into primary spermatocytes. Both spermatogonia and primary spermatocytes have how many chromosomes? 23 pairs, so 46 total. So they're 2N or diploid. You need to know. You might very well get a question, what cell is that? And you could say primary spermatocyte or spermatogonia. And how many chromosomes? You could answer 46. You could say 2N or diploid. It all means the same thing. Eventually, somewhere in here, those primary spermatocytes are going to begin meiosis 1, and they're going to divvy up their genetic material and become what? Secondary spermatocytes. So in this area, again, it's a progression. It's time they're under the influence of hormones as they're heading towards the lumen of the tube. They're maturing. So secondary spermatocytes in the middle. How many chromosomes now are we? First time we're looking at 23 are haploid. They're going to continue to divide and undergo meiosis 2 and turn into, right in the periphery here, spermatids. They're basically future sperm. They have not even begun to grow a tail yet. They're still actually connected to these Sertoli cells. Sertoli cells will at some point release them into the lumen when they start to develop tails. So right on the periphery, we're looking for spermatid. And how many chromosomes again? Still 23. And then by the time they're dumped in the center, you're looking at sperm. They're not viable yet, but they're immature sperm.
So primary and secondary have
No. Primary does. Secondary is now undergone meiosis 1. So one primary spermatocyte yields 2 secondary spermatocytes by way of meiosis 1. And then each secondary spermatocyte will divide into 2 spermatids. So in the male, from a starting point, you end up getting 4 haploid cells. Meiosis 1, then meiosis 2. We'll go over it in more detail in a minute. Then in between seminiferous tubules, you've got in areas like that's a good example, that's a good example over there. What have you got? Give you a hint, this is the hormone, luteinizing hormone goes down and has an effect on these cells here. And in males, you can call luteinizing hormone interstitial cell stimulating hormone. Because in males, luteinizing hormone goes down, it stimulates the interstitial cells, which you can also call Leydig cells, or if you feel real motivated, you can call them interstitial cells of Leydig. You have many options here. And what do they produce? You very well get a question, what hormone is produced by these? What are these cells? And name the hormone they produce. Testosterone. So ultimately, when we get, you need a combination of FSH for this maturing process, and you need testosterone from here as well to get to the point where you need, where you have fully functional sperm.
So all the parts, so you have each circle there, and everything in between those is.
Each circle is a seminiferous tubule with varying stages of future, potential sperm cells. Just a matter of maturation. As they get towards the center, they mature. Okay. What does this big giant thing look like? This whole thing is what? An ovary. So a lot of stuff in there. This is not the best ovary, but you can get, what's that big guy right in the center there? That has the look of what? Really pretty big. Graphian follicle. So this would be, this is the most mature follicle. The big space. Got to read questions. If you don't read questions, sometimes you're putting an answer that pertains to it, but it's not the right answer because it doesn't pertain to the question. It says, what space is that? You're looking for a space, which is called the antrum. And what fluid is going to be in this space? Follicular fluid. Follicular fluid, although it's a bit of a mystery actually in reality, it's apparently necessary for everything to develop properly. And then over on this part of the Graphian follicle, what cell is that? And you could really have one of two choices here. That's still, this is the outline of the Graphian mature follicle. The cell that's going to be in it is always going to be, it always looks like, has this look to it. What's that cell going to be? One of two possibilities depending on how close it is to actually ovulating. In other words, whether it's finished meiosis one or not. It could be a secondary oocyte because that's what actually gets expelled. But that implies that it has just finished meiosis one, and we don't know that, so it still could possibly be a primary oocyte. So you really don't know. Has everybody seen the poster where they depict the egg leaving as an ovulation? And it's just outside. If that egg was right over here, now you definitely would have to call it a what? Secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte is the female gamete. That's what gets ovulated. That's what will meet the sperm. So that's just a Graphian follicle with a primary or a secondary oocyte. The space is the antrum, and the fluid in that space is follicular fluid. Okay. If there was a question and it just pointed anywhere out here, it said, what part of the ovary is that? Cortex. Cortex is near the periphery. if it said, like right in here, what part of the ovary is that? Medulla. Tends to have a looser, it's a looser type of connective tissue. Sometimes it's more apparent than others, but if it's in the center of the ovary, it's the ovarian medulla. If it's on the periphery, I think these slides get pretty mangled up during processing, but the follicles should, in theory, be in the cortex, in the periphery. It doesn't always work out that way on some of these slides. You can see it's pretty beat up there. Okay, this is not the best one. I'm going to dig out a different slide in a second, but if you look at small little bubbles like that, what kind of follicles are they? Probably, at that size, what would be the best guess? Well, you have primordial, which are going to be the most immature, primary, eventually secondary, and then eventually mature, Graafian. So those would be, to me, this might be the beginning, although it's probably an early stage secondary follicle. These would be primary follicles. The primordial, but if you answered primordial, that's really okay too. That's maybe here's a better example. You can see some that are really, really tiny, like that. Probably the best bet would be primordial, but if they're real small, even these guys or those guys, the best answer is going to be either primordial follicle or primary follicle. We don't know exactly what stage of development
Those
it is.
are usually near the cortex?
They are supposed to be, all the follicles are supposed to be in the cortex. See, now you see the distinct difference between something like that and something like that. What do you think that probably is, an early stage secondary follicle probably? So these are primaries, the really, really tiny ones, which you run into are a little hard you can see would be primordial. By the time you're here or about that size, you're looking at secondary. There's a better secondary follicle in one of these here. That looks just like a textbook late secondary follicle. As you can see that it looks kind of like a mini Graafian follicle. Those guys in the periphery there, what would be one of two potential answers for those? Primary follicles or primordial? What kind of egg would be in there? Primary oocyte. How many chromosomes in a primary oocyte? 46. Or diploid or 2N. That's probably right there in the center. That's probably a fairly late stage what? You could probably a late stage what or an early stage what? Because ultimately it is a continuation. Probably a late stage secondary or very early stage Graafian. You know, it's kind of right in the middle, but you can see the development of the antrum. Here's the primary oocyte. You can actually even see the nucleus of the oocyte in that one. What about that right there? Now you're definitely looking at what? A Graafian follicle at some stage, you know, or whatever. But that would be looking like one that's getting ready to pop. Whereas something like that, again, you see the basic size difference. So that would be a good example of a secondary follicle. One more of these out.